So this is a conversation. So the expectation is that in a moment, Adriana or Carla are going to be running around with the mic I have in my hand, so that we can truly have this systemic interaction, more than just maybe talking, but feeling each other as well, given all the information. And we have 45 minutes to do this before we have a nice free lunch. So who has a comment or question? Okay, Carla, you can go first. Christina. I apologize.
Okay. It happens to me all the time, TC. I guess my comment is, I was thinking a lot. Whew, Dr. Lyle York, I never even had your class, and there's so much to say because I was thinking a lot about George Herbert Mead's the I and the me, and the smells, the stranger, and all this, and the work that we theoretically. But then I was also thinking about the work that Esther Arma does, who is a radio show talk show host, and she talks about emotional justice a lot. And so I've been doing Mia, and it's been great for me. For anyone who knows me, coming from where I come from, I can go from 0 to 100 real quick. But Mia has allowed me to have choice and agency when things like this happen to myself, where I am in control of my emotions. And the framework that Esther uses is basically the experiences we've had in terms of our oppression, which, by the way, is one side to the coin. The other side is privilege. So I'm so happy that you spoke on that behalf, because it is one full coin of dehumanization. And people from oppressive backgrounds as well as privileged backgrounds share two different faces of the same coin. And I really enjoyed what you said, Dr. York, because too often we like to focus on people being oppressed, and that's something that they need to heal from. But the other side of that is the privileged side, because that is also living a lie as well. That's also hindering people from seeing their own humanity and thus seeing everyone else's humanity. And I think it's really important that we understand that this work is for everybody, and that it's about rediscovering our humanity and what is it that we are here to do. And I think what that is just to help and love each other, but we become so blinded from systems that hinder us from even recognizing our own humanity. So thank you for being here today and wanting to reclaim your humanity, and I think that's what this is all about. And thank you guys for everything that you've said. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
So something made me create a conversation chair, so that you can be in the video if you'd like. Because Christine got to be in the video because of where she sat. So I'm going to invite Brett down to the conversation chair, just because I know that he has the courage and doesn't feel humiliated by this invitation. And so let's just gravitate and start having a conversation. While he's walking, did you want to respond, Lyle?
Well, no, I just thought it was very well said that all too often we don't really realize that I don't know if this is on or not. It's on? Okay.
Yeah, just take them off the stand so we can hand it to each other.
I got it. Okay, this is obviously a new technology here for me. I think that it's important to really realize that in trying to have the kind of sharing of experience and understanding the lived in, is that there are factors such as when you have the privileged and you have the people that are on the periphery in the same conversation, many times that has to be explicitly addressed. You see it in classrooms, you see it in cohorts like Aegis, where there's relational power. And relational power can either be the fact that it's formal power, if you will, such as when a faculty member says, well, we're all equal. Well, yeah, right, I understand that, totally, right? Or it could be that because of the topic, some people are viewed as having more expertise or whatever, or they just have higher social status. But then there's embedded hegemony that is right in the group, so that the privileged aren't even aware of their privilege, and that doesn't become part of the conversation. And for me, mindfulness is consciousness, awareness, and I'll just summarize very quickly by saying action inquiry is an important part of that, and it's being able to, when you hear yourself wanting to dismiss what the other person is saying, instead inquire and start asking questions. Saying, can you say more about, and I mean open-ended questions. I mean, can you tell me more about that? Can you say more about, that's interesting. And trying to draw the conversation out as opposed to falling into the normal reaction, which is to just say, yeah, but, and so I think the issue of privilege, the dialogue has to be on both sides.
I haven't practiced mindfulness too much, but I've recently been going to a place in Harlem called Mindfulness Harlem. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's a really wonderful center that focuses on checking in with yourself and understanding yourself, and that it's quite impossible to understand the world around you if you don't first understand yourself. You talked about being very reactionary. That's something that I work on as well. And I think mindfulness, from my very new understanding, is helping me with that. But something that's resonating in here with me today is to dehumanize something that is human in someone else, which is something that I always work on as someone with white privilege, as a male, is to not only dehumanize that person, it's also to dehumanize your own self, because to deny that which is human in someone else is to deny that which is human in yourself. And so that's one thread. Another is that trauma that's not transformed is transferred. I read a book, I think his name is Peter Levine, Waking the Tiger, and it talks about how if you're not able to meet out your own issues and reflect and go through that tangled mess of discovering yourself and transforming the traumas that you have, you will only end up perpetuating those traumas onto other people. And so in my very fresh understanding of mindfulness, those are the things that sit with me right now. So that's what I have to offer at this panel.
No, don't leave. Yeah. In that sense, the first part is when we call it mindfulness into action, is because we notice that at the end of the process, the person becomes mindful. Okay, we don't ask people to meditate or to do yoga or nothing of that. Okay, then we are kind of different. Sometimes when people come, they think that we're going to be having meditation, and they say, no, we don't do those things. What we do is, at the end of the process, you become mindful, and you didn't know you were not, you know? And going back to your comment about the trauma, the idea is when you do through mindfulness into action, we are peeling all of them little by little. And as you do this, you are happy and in peace and all of that. Like we use these indigenous practices to make sure you can process them. We don't need to suffer. We don't need to sacrifice. But we don't know that. You know, but through the process you will discover that. Yes?
So I'll be taking your class next year, right?
If I may add, Dr. V, what I'm discovering in this process is that as one becomes mindful, one takes action, one acts differently within and upon our environment. And I remember Dr. Emden earlier talking about cultural humility. I think where you speak so beautifully about being happy and peacefulness, these are pathways by which I think we can undertake or experience cultural humility. It is from that, operating from that space, of peacefulness and happiness, that I am most apt to do, as Dr. York is talking about, action inquiry, listen actively, and rather than react in ways that I have developed patterns of behaving towards experience that is different from mine, ask questions, yeah? And Brett, to your point about trauma that is not transformed, being transferred, that is what that peeling process, as I've experienced it, that Dr. Vergara is talking about, that's what begins to happen. Thanks.
That trauma is peeled away.
Yes, layers of trauma that I wasn't even, and I thought I was self-aware.
And I believe that to be human is to be traumatized. I think anyone who lives and exists on this earth, whether they're coming from a very privileged upbringing or not, because of the virtue that others are traumatized, you are going to be inherently traumatized as well, even if you're not experiencing it firsthand. So I think we all have to deal with this. Yeah.
That goes with what Nana was talking about, frequencies, like with these morphic fields from Rupert Sheldrake. When, at least for me, I'm going to share one. Okay, I'm very sensitive. I feel, I perceive things. Then if I'm walking on the street in New York and somebody is suffering, a beggar, I pick it up right away. And all of us, we do that, but we don't know we do. And then you are upset or sad, and you don't know, why am I sad? And it's because you were walking and you pick it up through your morphic field. Like things like that. Then what we do, we say, okay, you can shield yourself, which means to imagine that when you wake up, you put yourself in a bubble. And that way, when you are walking on the streets, everything is going to be bouncing. And you can try it and see how you feel, if it really affects you or not. And then we are doing research on it, if it's true or not. And at least for me it works, because there is so much pain around everywhere that we get entangled and we don't know we are. And then when we are entangled, we contribute to that without knowing.
So I wanted to add to the concept of the bubble that Dr. Vergara was talking about. And so weekly, as I mentioned, we would sit together and we would reflect. And there came a period for about 3 weeks towards the end where, I would be FaceTiming in with everyone and I would say, I don't know what to talk to you guys about. I don't feel like I had anything of significance this week to report. And it was me not realizing until Dr. Vergara said it that I had created my bubble, right? So I had been doing this process for the past, 15 weeks or, at that time, probably 12 weeks. And subconsciously, I was peeling away layers of trauma that I had experienced, growing up in occupied territories in Palestine during a war. And coming here and learning how to create a bubble was something incredibly important for me. So all of this to say that some of the things that are outcomes from this experience are things you don't realize are going to be outcomes. And so you get to a point, and like I mentioned earlier, I can be very emotional, and you don't realize that this is tied to layers of things that you may have experienced before in your past. But all of a sudden, I got to a point where, before I would talk, we had 5 minutes, I would probably talk for 25 minutes, like, oh, this and this and this and this happened. And I got to a point where I was like, my week was really bland, things happened, I don't really know what to report. And it was because I had created a bubble. I wasn't letting people's negative energy affect me. I was still experiencing, I had highs and lows. And, I was talking to them about this interview that I just totally royally bombed. But I was able to walk away from it, and it was because I had that bubble. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation as well.
Okay, so Brett, we'll let you go back to your seat, and I'll let someone self-select. So please, someone come and join the conversation on video if you like. Elizabeth, Jokania, Joladi, Irma, Anna, someone, please. So what I hear is the manner in which, to cope, we create walls, bubbles, defenses that become such a part of who we are that we are not mindful and the possibility of becoming mindful. So it's just so exciting to explore this tool of mindfulness into action for stripping away the layers of trauma. And we're living at a time in this golden age where what's required is for us to support Mother Earth and her process of transcendence. Since you introduced it, I'll repeat it. And that it's time for us to raise the frequency of our own vibration. And if we are vibrating at the level of a house full of domestic violence and sexual abuse and incest and parental drug addiction and parental alcoholism and fighting, if that is, or living in a war-torn country and the war and the violence and the hostility and the fear and the bombings and the terror, and that's how we grew up for decades, okay, then we are literally walking around at that frequency or holding those frequencies. I have a mentor who talks about how African Americans, because of the enslavement experience, because of the trauma of centuries of oppression, that not only can you see being cramped, into the belly of a slave ship packed like sardines, but the DNA, the actual DNA, folded in on itself to protect itself. So that you're talking about a state of compression, a state of, and life is about being open. Life is about this unfolding. As Professor Emden said, the point at which the bud cannot be a bud anymore, but has to flower. And so that's what we have to do. So we're talking about having a very powerful tool that can begin to strip away the layers of trauma so that the DNA can now evolve into this multi-strand DNA that's going to allow us to vibrate at a higher frequency even as the planet, Mother Earth, is transcending and vibrating at a higher frequency. So, are we going to sit and say, oh, well, there's climate change? Come on, Anna, have a seat. Are we going to sit and say, oh, but, what about the water? What about the seeding of clouds and germ warfare? What about all these things that may be happening? But we're living at a time when we can very quickly, in 2 weeks and 4 weeks, achieve the third head, achieve this stripping away, so that we are now able to vibrate at a higher frequency, so that we can, as you described, come from the heart. Because I actually heard John Martin give a very good description of the shift when he started to come also from the heart to connect, okay? And it's just vital. As you said, it's an urgent time. It's a critical time. So think about the transformation that's possible if all the people on the West Bank or all Palestinians or all refugees dispersed could go through a process of healing. And what about the possibilities of all of us committing to holding in mind this image of a healed humanity, vibrating at a higher frequency, free from generations of trauma, generations of war, generations of refugee status, generations of oppression, generations of racism, enslavement. If we can hold in mind a visual image of humanity healed, starting with ourselves, and maybe visualize ourselves setting our iPhones to go off every hour as a part of this exercise, that could be a first step.
First of all, wow, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I think I know why I couldn't come when I wanted to come to Teachers College, and now I started this semester. I think I know why now. And I wanted to just ask you all a little bit more about microaggressions in terms of dealing with them from a more mindful perspective when they are directed to you, but also how I have heard in your talks how this has affected, how this has allowed you to see from another perspective, a little bit more removed. But I would like to also hear a little bit more about how this has allowed you to connect with the other and to sort of perhaps diminish or not, or realize more when you are the ones that are engaging into patterns that generate microaggressions.
Would you like to give an example?
Of a microaggression I did? So I think I know the example you're talking about. I was at a conference probably something close to 8 weeks ago, and at my table I was a moderator. I was a glorified note taker, if you will, and the former I'm blanking at his title.
That's good. Continue.
Yeah, so a very important political person in DC, and if any of you have ever lived in DC, you quickly realize that everyone feels that they are some sort of self-important. So this gentleman was, Speaker of the House, type individual in a medical sense, and I wish I could come up with his title. I probably just blacked it out at this point because it was so mortifying. But he was sitting at the table, and everyone is introducing themselves, and I'm sitting there as a note taker, and the type of microaggression I experienced was one where he reached out to me and he said, "So what qualifies you to sit here and take these notes?" I thought, well, I was assigned to this table and I sat here to take these notes, but I didn't say that. And I said, I'm here to offer you support in any capacity that I can. I'm here to capture your ideas, and I'm here to take them back to the individuals organizing this conference and move them along. And that's just an example of how Mia had really transformed how I dealt with that example of a microaggression. I think that if at week 0, knowing some of the things you know about me, I would have gone to 100 in a second and said, well, thank you for being here. We're happy that you're here to share your thoughts. I'm here and I'm qualified because X, Y, and Z. But I was at a point, because of some of the practice that I had been doing, where I didn't feel the need to explain myself. Okay, you have a chip on your shoulder, so what? So does everyone else in this city. It doesn't have to affect my reaction to you. And so when I think of how, I'm in a situation dealing with that type of microaggression, that's how my shift in consciousness has allowed me to change my reaction, to let it just be something that rolls off my back and just move forward with my day, not let it interrupt me in the slightest.
And if I may, from my perspective, this is where the subject-object shift is apparent. So it's not that I don't feel pain, I don't feel hurt by slurs or slights, but I am not subject to them. I am not, I don't take them on. I don't take ownership of whatever the energy is that is being projected, yes, at me. And for not taking it on or taking ownership of it, I can engage the person, still respecting their humanity, and even possibly facilitate them through and beyond their disrespect, be it, you know, conscious or unwitting, you know? Does that make any sense? Okay.